Happy Nurses Week and welcome to season 2 of Dr. G at the Heart of Healthcare. I have a special guest here with me today, and I'm so excited to tell you about her story and her journey and her school. This is Death Doula Kacie, and she is just doing amazing things on social media and creating a beautiful movement for death doulas. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And let me just do your little brief intro because I am so impressed with your background and I can't wait to just, share with everyone. So, this morning, we have Kacie Gikonyo. I said it right. Beautiful Kenyan last name. So interesting background you have. Married, lives in Ohio, near the Cleveland Clinic over there. One of our great places that help with healthcare. And you have 3 kids, and you come from an administrative background, and switched into nursing. You and I have that in common because I had a different background, and then came into healthcare. So let's just let you jump in with your story. So tell me how you got into nursing, and then we're going to transition to how you ended up creating your death doula school.
I don't even know if I remember how I got into nursing. Feels like so long ago. I think I always knew that I was supposed to be a nurse, but I was afraid to go to like college and actually do it. But once I did, I loved it. I loved learning everything that I was learning, and then going to clinicals alongside of learning and like hands-on learning and learning at the same time. It was all really great. So that's kind of what led me to nursing. I worked in the field as a nurse for about 12 years. And I held many roles, but mostly administrative roles. So I was a unit manager, an assistant director of nursing. Most recently, I was a director of education and a CDC certified infection preventionist. And I worked the front lines of COVID as an infection preventionist. So yeah, that's a little bit of my nursing background there for you.
Wow. Wait, let's pause on that because I feel like COVID broke us all. And we have not fully metabolized the effects of it. Like, was there a particular thing in COVID that, may have switched you over into this role maybe? Or I'm trying to figure out because you have a really, really interesting story. Like, how do you think you were affected by COVID?
Yeah, so COVID was so interesting for me because it was COVID, right? Everybody was just like freaking out about everything. But for me, I was an infection preventionist. So I was elbow deep in people with COVID, testing people who have COVID, people who don't. I mean, just all in it. I was in a long-term care facility at the time. And I mean, I saw just an exorbitant amount of people die in a really short amount of time, and their deaths were tragic, if you ask me. They didn't get to say goodbye to their family because, we had to have the doors closed. No one was allowed in. Their families didn't get to say goodbye to them, and they were alone. Sometimes we couldn't get hospice in there on time, and even nursing wise, staffing during COVID was a nightmare. Some of the staff members had COVID and couldn't be there. It was really, really rough. And so I realized during that time that while everybody else was like really hyper focused on COVID and what that meant for them, are they going to bring it home to their family? I was hyper focused on helping these people die better. It was all I could think about was some of them were very frail, and it wasn't surprising that they died, but some of them were not. Some of them were healthy one day and then dying the next day, and they never got to say goodbye to their families. And it was too much. I had to help in any way that I could. But I knew in that moment that this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I'm meant to work in this type of situation, an end of life, a death situation. I knew this is where I really shine. I ended up getting laid off of nursing during COVID, which was okay. I had really small kids at home, so that wasn't so bad for me. But I knew that I needed to find something else. Like, I knew I had this calling to work with people at the end of life, and I wanted to do it in such a way that I probably wouldn't be able to do in a nursing type role. So I did a lot of research and tried to find out what other type of support there was at the end of life. And really, there isn't much, but I stumbled upon death doulas and end of life doulas. And when I read what a death doula is, the definition of a death doula is somebody that helps a person to labor out of this world. it just went off like a bomb. Like, wait a minute, that's what this was. That's what I've been doing all along. That's what this pull was for me to help these people die as opposed to being so focused on COVID. When I read what the definition of a death doula is, they help somebody to labor out of this world. It kind of just blew my mind because that's what I was already. That's what I've already been doing. I was already focused on that calling. I just didn't even know it had a name or what it really was. And so without hesitation, I immediately started investigating, how can I do this? How can I become this? Um,
that's what you were already doing in COVID.
yes.
And so,
Yes, definitely. So since I was already kind of filling that role, once I found out how to do it, I found a training program. I mean, I signed up right away. I even applied for a scholarship, and I got the scholarship. I had to write an essay about what I would do with the certification. If you decide to be an end of life doula, death doula, what would you do with that? And so I had written an essay about what I would do, and I got approved for the scholarship. So it just felt like, the universe was like, yes, this is what you're supposed to do. Go for it.
wow. So
So,
wait a minute. Can I ask a question?
yeah.
So, because I know people are wondering, like, what the heck is the training? I don't know if you caught, the episode where I interviewed, the president of NEDA on
Mhm.
on the World Death Doula Training Day. And I'm a learner myself trying to figure out what's going on with this movement and how it can be used, for our end of life patients, as a hospice physician. So could you tell me what training you did, what that was called?
Yeah, I went with the INELDA, the International End of Life Doula Association.
Okay.
INELDA for short, because it's quite long.
Okay.
I compared and contrast. There's a lot of different programs out there, so I was kind of looking at all of them and which one had which to offer. But I landed on INELDA, so that's the training program that I took.
Okay. Okay. And then this is so exciting for me. Let's rewind a little bit. So, where did you go to nursing school and all that stuff? Because I forgot to ask. Because I'm so excited to get to the death doula school.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up here in Ohio, and I went to Kent State for my nursing degree. So I have a nursing degree through Kent State. I did work as a nurse a little bit here in Ohio, but I think it was like under a year even before I ended up moving to Philadelphia. So the bulk of my nursing career was really out in Philadelphia because I was living out there at the time until I moved back here in 2021.
Okay, and then I have this little question. I wasn't thinking this before. Why do you think? Wait, and you told me you thought you wanted to do pediatrics, but you landed in senior care, long-term care facilities, and the places where the vulnerable seniors really need that care. I want to know why you decided to become a death doula and didn't just swap over to like becoming a hospice nurse, with all your years of experience. Like, what was that decision like for you?
Oh, you mentioned earlier that COVID broke us, right?
Mhm.
COVID kind of broke my relationship with nursing up a little bit in a way that I didn't want to necessarily work in a traditional nursing role anymore. So that was why I was looking outside of hospice. The things that I didn't particularly love about nursing are going to be the same problems in hospice, just with a different title. I really wanted to be able to devote myself wholly and fully to a whole family and be there for them to support them without having to juggle them plus all of these other people or all of these other duties. I really wanted to be able to be much more emotionally, spiritually supportive than sometimes nurses are able to be. So
That's
that's what made
beautiful.
me make that transition.
That's beautiful. I feel that way about Mourning Dove Medical. I love what I do, but this is a place where it sparks joy all the time because I know I'm making a difference in a family's life, patients and families' life, not necessarily when working for certain people and doing things. So we share that in common too. So thank you for sharing that because People need to hear that. And so I believe, that experience you have is the foundation of what legitimizes, your death doula school, your end of life doula school. So tell us how your death doula school was born.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I took my death doula training program, I finished, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from there. I don't even know that I necessarily realized that like I really had to open a business and do all of these things that that entails, right? So I was just kind of lost and didn't know what to do, but I had to do something. I had to move forward. So I started reaching out to death doulas anywhere that I could find. I mean, just Googling death doulas or putting in Facebook death doulas, literally anything I could find to try to connect myself with any other death doulas who maybe would have some advice for me. But what I found was that they were all like really happy to meet me, but they also had no idea what they were doing and they didn't have any advice. They were like, sweet, let's figure this out together. Um, so I ended up, taking some additional trainings and such as far as business goes, because as a nurse, I don't deal with business stuff. I never had to market myself, or go networking or any of those things that like a business owner needs to do. So I really needed to familiarize myself with what that meant first. And once I did that, then it was kind of easy to get things rolling. But what I realized was this is what all of my colleagues were missing too. They were missing that piece of it, but then they were also missing a lot of stuff that I already had because of my nursing career. So I actually started offering just kind of bonus classes here and there, like, hey, do you want to learn more about hospice? Here's a course about that. Do you want to learn more about how to open a business as a death doula? Here's a course about that. But they were very extremely popular. And so this had me realizing that I could just train people better or more complete from the get-go. Right now there's a lot of death doulas that are being trained on what is a death doula and what a death doula does. But to be a successful death doula, you have to know way more information than what is a death doula and what a death doula does. That is the absolute bare minimum of what you need to know. You need to know how to open a business. You need to know what hospice does. I mean, we work alongside each other beautifully together. And so the death doula needs to be able to help guide the family. Maybe you should give hospice a call, or I think hospice has this that could help at this moment. You know what I mean? Just the way that we could support our families if we truly and fully understand everything hospice is and everything they have to offer. Even educating families about hospice. That's a big thing that I've done as a death doula. I come in before people are hospice appropriate. And then there's always all this misconception about what hospice is. And so I get to educate them about what hospice is so that by the time we get on hospice, they have a full understanding of all of the support that they're going to receive from me versus from hospice, because it's different. So anyways, this gave me this passion to open Death Doula School. Death Doula School curriculum is comprehensive and complete. So it includes education from myself, a seasoned RN, director of education. Obviously have the educator gene, if you will. I love educating people. But it also includes education from a lot of other leaders in the end of life realm. So, in order to be a good death doula, you need to know how to open a business. You need to know about hospice and what they do, but also you need to know about hospice and how we work together, how we can pass referrals back and forth from each other, how you can introduce yourself to the hospice companies in the area so they even know that you exist, all of these relationships we can have. But then I also educate about stuff like medical aid in dying. Medical aid in dying is not legal here in Ohio where I live, but it is legal in 11 states throughout the country. And my courses are, worldwide. So there could be people in those states that need to know about medical aid in dying. So because of that, I have a doctor from California who works with medical aid in dying who's actually provided a bit of education as well. So you get, just my kind of base understanding of it, but then like a really deep understanding of it from somebody who does it from start to finish with, prescribing and walking the patients through and all of that. It goes through psychedelics at the end of life, working with children, working with grief, working with pets, self-care, because being a death doula, self-care is part of your job. It has to be. It has to be part of your job in order to keep you whole. And for me, that deserves an entire module. So I've devoted a whole module to how important it is for you to take care of yourself in order to be able to take care of others. That's not everything, but there's all kinds of stuff in there. I mean, I've got like the human composting, I've got information from the people in Washington, Return Home, I think it's called. They do the human composting. I have information about Parting Stone. Um, they're the company that turns human cremains into beautiful rocks that you can like hold and keep and display and all of this stuff. So, anyways, my curriculum is just very whole and complete, and it will give you an overabundance of education because my goal is to create successful death doulas, not just death doulas, successful death doulas.
That is
There we
just
go.
phenomenal. And when you started talking about hospice, it's like you said, the preface of the book, The Real Deal About Hospice. So I co-authored that with the End of Life Doula, Death Doula. So I have some insights about the work that you do. And one of the articles I put in there is a bleak figure about how 27% of Americans know what hospice is and what it does. That is terrible. Like less than half basically know what we do. And so you educating them about hospice care is really a beautiful thing. What I want to know is how does a person know when to call Death Doula Kacie? Like, because you mentioned, you're educating them about hospice. We know that people often seek hospice care too late. They don't even get a piece of their 6 month benefit, 6 month or more benefit. So when do they call you? When would a family say, I need to consider a death doula?
Me personally, I will work with anybody, but the people that I most commonly find me and that I really am passionate about working with are people who've received a cancer diagnosis or a terminal diagnosis. It just typically is cancer, but it doesn't have to be cancer at any age of life. So maybe they're 20 or they're 30 or they're 40, they're young, they've received this terminal diagnosis. Now, maybe they're still receiving palliative treatments, they're still doing stuff. They're still fighting it and that's okay. Um, I don't have the same requirements as hospice does, right? So I can kind of come in whenever. So if you receive a terminal diagnosis, that right there requires support, regardless of what necessarily the future is going to look like. So that's where I really, really love to kind of get in. It's interesting because like 5 of my clients have been women who used a birthing doula. And when they found out they had a terminal diagnosis, they researched to see if there was the same thing, and that's kind of why they hired me, because they had used a birthing doula and said like it was the most incredible experience. Like, of course, I know that I need you at the end of life. So I usually start way before. I mean, most of my clients are still receiving palliative treatments and we work together for however long we need to. Um, that's kind of my ideal client. But you can really work with a death doula at any time. I mean, even people who are interested in just becoming destigmatized to death, there's a lot of people who have severe death anxiety, and just having some exposure therapy, just talking it out a little bit. A lot of people's fears and anxieties about death are surrounding like these beliefs that they have in their mind that maybe necessarily aren't even true, that you can kind of walk them through and clear that up to remove a little bit of stress and anxiety. And even end of life planning. I'm so passionate about end of life planning. I know you know how this goes because I've seen too many people have things just go terribly wrong just because the planning wasn't in place. And I think there's just not enough emphasis worldwide about how important it is to plan for these things at any age. You know what I mean? Death does not discriminate. So, like, I have no idea if I will be here next week or not. So, I like to work with people at any age who are interested in exploring, like, what does that mean getting my end of life planning together? And, how can I do that? So, ideally, if you receive a terminal diagnosis, that would be when you call Death Doula Kacie, but there's all these other situations where we can work together as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned advanced care planning because a lot of folks don't want to deal with that. And I'm trying to put myself in folks' shoes, for the folks who are reluctant to learn more about the movement, even physicians, administrators, and other folks who are non-hospice people. The hospice people, we're in it, but
Right.
I'm trying to consider the others. And I know people are afraid of the H word. That was my first podcast, hospice, that like just even saying it makes someone say no. Or when they don't know the difference between hospice and palliative care, they're like, no, I don't want palliative care. physicians have said it's not time for palliative care. So if they're unreceptive to that, I'm wondering what the barriers are for them to say, oh, let's call the death doula, right? Because I know I'm just musing right now, we call the birthing doula when we find out we're pregnant, right? So we have a terminal diagnosis. Some people are hoping to fight. So why would I call a death doula? Because I don't want to die. I don't think I'm
Right.
dying. No one told me I'm dying. So why would I call you? And so I'm kind of like, thinking those thoughts. So let's dig into that a little bit.
For sure. So part of my goal as a death doula, and not my goal, part of the death doula movement and the death care movement in general is to change the ideas around death and dying. And so I can tell you that with the generation that's aging out right now, they're most of them are not willing to hear anything about a death doula or work with a death doula. It's people that are of a younger age that are more understanding. But I think that's because there's people like myself and like you who are out here just pumping out this education that people need to know because we know that people need to know it. And so I think that as, a new generation of people begins to age out, they're going to look at death differently and they're going to see death differently. And they're going to know, here's what I'm looking at the end of life. Here's the support hospice can provide. Here's the support a death doula can provide. Do I want the absolute best care and support at the end of life? If so, I need to work with both of them. And like you said, people are terrified of the word hospice. Well, I'm going to take care of that because I'm going to make everybody talk about a death doula instead. And a death doula sounds way scarier than hospice.
Yeah.
So next thing you know, nobody will be afraid of hospice anymore. But
Yay,
yeah,
we want that day.
for sure. That's my goal, though, is to change the narrative, to completely change the narrative about it. Every single one of us is going to die. Not one of us is making it out of here alive. Whether we talk about it, whether we learn about it, whether we plan for it, it's going to happen. So let's talk about it and let's learn about it and let's plan for it so that it can be such a better experience.
There is no better way to end this podcast. I am so grateful that I got to meet you on here.
Yeah.
I'll let you have the parting words because that was it. Like you can drop the mic after what you
I
just
know, right?
said. Yeah, but I'll let you wrap this up. What do you want to close this podcast episode down with?
I really like you. I want to bring legitimacy to the death doula name, and I want to help people who are interested in being a death doula. I want to help them be successful in any way that I can, because I know that creating successful death doulas is going to help more people die better. And that's my goal, is I want to help people die better. And I can't be there for everybody, so I have to create people who can be there for everybody. And there's my second mic drop.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you for all you do. And you're still a nurse. So happy Nurses Week or Nurses Month,
Thank
whatever
you.
it is for y'all. And it's so good to meet you. I wish you much success in the Death Doula School and how you're amplifying the education and creating successful death doulas and making death and dying better for folks in this country and around the world, I should say. So thank you for being here. We're going to sign out on this episode of Dr. G at the Heart of Healthcare. Peace.
Thank you.